we've talked about it in letters, and we've talked about it on the phone. But how you really feel about it, I don't really know.
What's your take on Cassavetes? 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 Misogynist, genius, misogynist, genius, misogynist, genius, misogynist, genius. What's your take on Cassavetes? What's your take on Cassavetes? What's your take on
Welcome to There's Sometimes a Buggy, Irresponsible Opinions About Classic Film. I'm Elise.
I'm Dave, and Elise, this is quite a milestone. It's our 52nd episode of There's Sometimes a Buggy.
What does that mean?
It means we have done it every single week for the past year.
And we are also in the COVID rebound, it appears.
Download-wise, yes, it does seem like people maybe are catching up with shows that they missed in the past. I hope that means some people's lives are getting back to normal. That's a wonderful thing to think about.
But there's one episode that's still lagging behind, you said. Seriously lagging behind.
Well, yeah, that's an interesting question. Our previous Warner Brothers 1932 episode seems to have gotten fewer downloads than any of the ones around it, and that one featured a discussion of I'm a Fugitive from a Chain Gang, so don't miss that.
Also, the movie it was paired with,
Life Begins, which is great as well, but that one I can understand because a lot of people are probably having trouble finding it. Although, of course, you can always write to us if that's the case, and we'll point you in the right direction. But I'm a Fugitive from a Chain Gang is widely available and definitely a movie everyone should see, so...
and you should at least hear about.
Yeah.
And in fact watch Life Begins, which is kind of an obscure gem.
It is. 1 year later, we're back to Warner Brothers, and in Warner Brothers 1933, we're going to be talking about two very beautifully paired films, Babyface by Alfred E. Green, and Employee's Entrance by Roy Del Ruth.
Yeah, these are two fantastic films, and they, as you said, paired together even better than we expected. Obviously, Warner Brothers had something on its mind in 1933.
It was a rough year.
So how would we say that these two are paired together? Well, by virtue of their, but this is the pre-code in general, their sexual scandalousness, but also by virtue of the protagonist embodying a certain form of capitalism that Warner's makes very monstrous, but very sexy. More sexy than capitalism ever looks at MGM. And they are both protagonists who have become the way they have due to coming from lower class circumstances.
Yeah, they're backed into a corner and they fight back the only way that you can under the current system, which is to become a monster yourself, basically.
But the fun is in seeing how they do it.
Yeah.
Well, the fun and the horror.
That's right. Let's start with Babyface.
Sure, this is probably the better known film, although Employee's Entrance seems to be getting more attention now.
Good.
It was preserved as historically significant in 2019. I don't know if that has anything to do with the Me Too trend, because when we first watched it together, the first time either of us had seen it a couple of years ago, it was right in the throes of Me Too, maybe at its peak, who knows? It was very relevant to think about in that context.
Yeah.
But yeah, Babyface has been getting attention for a lot of time as a major pre-code since they released the uncensored version.
Yeah, I mean, even the censored version has plenty to discuss within it, right? I don't think that there's too much, but you've been reading up on the changes.
Yeah, I read up on the changes. The main changes were that the professor's Nietzschean speech, or I don't even know if he's a professor, he might as well be a professor. He's an immigrant from Germany, and I guess he was at least a professor.
Seems like he's kind of living in reduced circumstances after making the journey across the Atlantic.
And now living in a factory town.
And looking for anyone to pass his wisdom on to, and he settles on Barbara Stanwyck.
So in the censored version, the Nietzschean professor, his speech, his Ubermensch speech to her becomes a moralizing speech about the cost of trying to get success that way
Right.
being too high. And the ending, the censored ending, confirms that by making her go back to her hometown with nothing.
Right. Because I did watch both of them when I bought that pre-code DVD, but that was like 15 years ago now at least, so I couldn't remember what the changes were.
The ending of this one is a little bit ambiguous.
I think it's perfect.
Yeah, we don't actually know what her future is going to be exactly.
No.
Well, okay, let's get into a discussion of it then. So, oh, by the way, do you happen to know who Mark Canfield is? Don't look, to whom the story is attributed.
I know that name from something, but I've forgotten.
No, you don't, because it's Xanax.
Okay, no, I did know that.
Okay.
Yeah. It was his
That's where you
pseudonym.
know it from? Yeah, I
Yeah.
don't think he used it again, but did he?
He might have, or I might have just read about it in
Okay.
connection with this film at one
Yes,
point.
it was Zanuck who was head of production at the time.
A great writer, a real instinct for telling stories that were of the moment. And he was about to leave Warner Brothers over all kinds of difficulties that are kind of connected to what Warren William is dealing with, actually, in our second feature.
So this does kind of play like a movie that's more concept than story.
True.
But it really doesn't matter, because the Art Deco sets, unusual for Warner Brothers, are gorgeous. The costumes are gorgeous. The direction is very droll.
Yeah.
And Stanwyck is a genius.
Yes.
She is already here in 1933 giving like a full acteur performance, especially in the more low-key playing, which almost all of this is.
A couple of weeks from now, we're going to be doing the Capra Stanwicks. Those were all done already by this point, except for Meet John Doe. So she's in her prime already.
She's already a master. And she's also a master of the universe. This is a very superwoman-y, obviously, in the Ubermensch sense that we already talked about, but also a very superwoman-y plot, in a way that I have really never seen outside of the Dietrich Sternberg movies, and that there is no external obstacle that she can't overcome once she's set her mind to it. Her only fallibility is love.
Sure, that's an Achilles heel. Before we get to that phase of her life, we do want to talk a bit about the environment that she grows up in.
Apparently, all sources here say that Stanwyck came up with the idea. I guess it was a pretty loose scenario that Zanuck cooked up, and Stanwyck came up with the idea of having the character having a history of being pimped out by her father. And Stanwyck, of course, came from a similar sort of background. I don't know about that aspect, but could very well have been.
Hopefully not.
It was a pretty hard-bitten rise. Oh, and of course, you can't watch this movie without thinking about the fact that these basically are Barbara Stanwyck's politics. They arose under basically the same circumstances as his characters, and they are part of her screen appeal.
Sure.
The aesthetic of it is part of her screen appeal.
Yeah, it's true. Without the social critique, she just, in her personal life, decided to embody the Nietzschean proto-Ayn Rand rise to the top.
As a survival mechanism.
The film, however, is definitely a product of a leftist mind. It's really interesting the way the milieu is introduced, right? This is a speakeasy in some kind of industrial suburb, Erie, Pennsylvania.
Okay.
It's mentioned once.
Yeah, and
that's where they're from.
We see sort of an overhead or overview shot of the town with all the smokestacks going.
Yeah.
The familiar movie view of this sort of milieu at the time.
This crusty dive serves hard men who want to get drunk fast. On the other hand, the clientele are not shown to be so horrible with her, frankly. Well, they grab at her. But the worst person
is the politician.
Exactly. He's not a working man.
And that's who she's been pimped out to, presumably because, these working men can't do anything for her father. But the politicians can.
Yeah, her father is kind of in the position of a Billy Wilder protagonist, except a much lower class version of it. We don't really get to know much about him, except that he's disgusting.
Yes, as she tells him.
Yes, he's very disgusting.
And Stanwyck, by the time we meet her character, who is maybe 20 at best at the beginning of the movie, is completely over it.
Yeah,
she's over. She gives zero fucks.
It's so economically done. Now, we do have that brief scene with her and Nat Pendleton, who was actually playing much larger roles usually in films at MGM. They must have got him just because they wanted like a giant hulking bruiser for that one scene. But he's pretty gentle. He just asks her to go down by the quarry, and she doesn't go today, but she presumably has gone before.
But you can understand that she's tired not only of sleeping with politicians since she was 14, as she said, but also of being pawed by these big hulking brutes.
It is a very interesting choice to have it be like, this is just part of her overall depression, that these are the choices. But what really is the catalyst for change is this disgusting guy from outside. The way in which she fights off this guy is just incredibly...
No one has the persona to do this but Barbara Stanwyck. Nobody could break a beer bottle over a guy's head
so laconically.
And then turn around and finish drinking her beer.
So that just gives you all you need to know.
Joan Crawford would be too angry about it.
Yeah, she would chase him down the street. This is the way to do it. This is the way to show that she has been subjected to this every single day of her life, probably since she was like 12 or 13.
She says 14. But at this point, as the professor points out to her, she's not really thinking any steps beyond just fending them off as they come at her.
And that's a fool's game. And the movie is very clear. Exploitation is going to happen. That's the society that you live in. So either you let others exploit you, or you exploit your own resources.
Which the professor articulates.
Yeah, no, he says it exactly like that. It's not subtext.
It's not even Nietzschean terms. It's really, Nietzsche is kind of substituting for Marx. Marx with an advocacy for taking matters into your own hands.
It's Marxist libertarianism.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, that's basically what Ayn Rand is.
Yeah.
So it anticipates Ayn Rand. The interesting thing about this character as well is that she has one friend, Chico.
Theresa Harris,
Yeah.
who's actually remarkably enough credited in this movie. That didn't always happen.
Right, although she is credited last, it must be said.
Yeah, which her role probably deserves better than that.
Yeah. They have formed a friendship. It's not perfect, obviously. You could watch
Well,
this...
her role is literally to support the white woman
Exactly.
protagonist, emotionally support her.
Right, but they do stick up for each other whenever they can. At the beginning here, it's really just solidarity of the most basic sort. Like, Stanwyck says that she will take off and leave the bar if Chico gets fired, and of course the dad needs her there. She's the only reason any of these guys come there. They have a lot of choices, presumably, to go get
Right, so
rotten liquor.
already she has a little bit of leverage, but she's not aware of it due to her sexual magnetism.
Well, she's aware of it to the extent that she can keep her friend there, but that's it. She doesn't have anything else that she can get from her dad. Her dad has nothing to give
True.
other than not firing Chico.
And I really have never seen any kind of attempt even at a cross-racial relationship like this anywhere except in one instance, also a pre-code, which is the relationship between Diedrich and Hattie McDaniel and Blonde Venus.
Well, the other one that I can think of is Hallelujah, I'm a Bum, where Al Jolson has a friendship kind of like this. Also kind of has the same trajectory when he starts to get into money. The only way that they can stay together is one has to be the manservant, obviously.
Right.
It's not Al Jolson. So, an interesting film that maybe we'll do someday. It wasn't made by a studio, it was a United Artists film.
It is, of course, entirely blatantly fictional that only Stanwyck is getting sexually harassed by these men.
Oh yeah, of course. Well, we'll talk about that.
Yeah. It's almost like having Theresa Harris there puts Stanwyck in a stand-in position for Theresa Harris in certain ways.
Yeah, I would say so as well.
Symbolically.
Theresa Harris isn't really playing a character at all.
No.
She's playing an embodiment of...
Like a social symbol more than anything.
And she provides this sort of chorus, the St. Louis Blues, which she sings whenever Barbara Stanwyck is going into her act.
Yeah,
Her seductive
a
act.
musical Greek chorus.
Yeah. Any objection the father might have had to Stanwyck leaving after all of this are stamped out by the fact that he gets blown up in his still. So that's the end of that phase of her life. It's quite a send-off.
And again, the way she looks not very
Not wistful.
Not very mournful as
No.
Dad blows up.
Bye, Dad.
It's the end of you. Teresa Harris looks more concerned.
Quite something. It's quite a brave choice, I think.
You can see in this movie where, although this character is far more interesting, where the double indemnity character comes from, as she starts wielding her sexual power.
Sure, but Martha Ivers is a much better descendant, I think, of this character.
Yeah, despite our recent new appreciation of Billy Wilder, again, double indemnity is interesting for every reason except the Stanwyck character.
Well, most people out there probably do not agree with us on that, so we'll have to do an episode on it one day and watch it again and see what we really feel about it.
Oh, I've watched it a lot of times.
Maybe a double feature with Martha Ivers.
Sure. I've watched the big Wilders many, many times, and the ones I really like, and the ones I don't change my mind about.
They hit the rails. They hop a freight, like many have done in Warner Brothers movies of the early 30s, so this is a familiar sight to moviegoers, but they don't often see Barbara Stanwyck doing this kind of thing.
Yeah, and then one of the workers is going to throw them off and put them in jail, and Stanwyck, remembering her lessons,
Puts it into practice.
basically offers him a blowjob.
Yeah.
I mean, there's nowhere else for the imagination to go as to how that scene that we don't see ends.
So again, she can't really trade sex for much here, except for not going to jail, which is an important thing.
But
And-
she's just getting her start. So this is important. This is an
Oh,
important
it's important. I'm just
transaction.
saying it's not transferable into currency, but she's going to be able to get more and more out of people as she goes along.
She knows it. She's on her path. Got the secret. The
Yeah.
secret is a blowjob.
So you got to get to New York, and then everything else will take care of itself. When they do,
They show up in front of a giant bank.
well, they walk by a bunch of other things
Or
first,
offices
right?
of a bank, I guess.
There's the restaurant. Teresa Harris would like to go in and get a steak, and Stanwyck says, "Come on, you ate yesterday. It's all in your mind."
Yeah, and you've got to have... It's very important to have self-control. You've got to steel yourself to do things with your body that you don't want to do, and not do things with your body that you do want to do.
Right, there's time for steak after we've made our millions. And yes, they show up at this skyscraper. The camera will go back to it many times, the full skyscraper, as we watch her ascent. And the first step is to find out how to get a toehold in there, and she asks, got like a policeman's uniform.
He seems to be private security for the bank, though.
Yeah, he's an employee there. He's not really a cop, but it's hard to tell the difference.
Is there a meaningful difference?
No, there isn't. But it's not usual to see that in a movie, that these authority figures are just really working directly for bankers. Now, he tells her where to go.
Well, she doesn't just ask him. She asks him
Oh,
with
yeah,
a
of course.
meaningful, flirtatious smile.
Yeah, otherwise he'd tell her to get off the curb. They head over to the HR office, the personnel office, right away. Again, there's an opportunity. He's a Warner Brothers bit player. I've seen him before.
There's
Mr.
a guy
Pratt.
who, there's no other way, I'm sorry to offend body positivity people, because I do think that's an important thing, but in order to describe what the movie is doing here, he's a chubby guy.
Sure,
And he gets offered another blowjob, basically.
or something.
What else? It's not a hand job. It's got to be better than a hand job.
Who knows what it is, man? It might be even more. I don't know. They've got an hour.
I think this guy is worth a blowjob.
Well, he's important because he's not letting anyone stay for interviews, and obviously he does because she's got a job afterwards. She sidles into it by talking about the South. She's clearly not from the South, but she says she knows some Pratts where she's from too, and maybe she'll tell them about it someday. Next we see she's got a job in the filing department. Each new job, it's detailed in a graphic.
Ori Kelly is having a field day. Every single time we see Stanwyck, she has a new hairdo and a new dress.
Yes.
And it charts her rise, the dresses and the hairdos.
The filing department, there's all kinds of stuff that works elliptically. Just mentioned for 2 seconds by someone, and you have to... John Wayne has already been working on her behalf, so she's been dating him up, clearly, because he's been whispering in the ear of his boss that she's ready for promotion.
I forgot to look up what else Alfred E. Green did.
Well, I know he did Dangerous, which is Bette Davis's Gene Eagles movie.
Because the tone of this movie is, like I already said, but it's very droll and laconic.
Yeah.
Like, it's strong directorial choices here, and most of the storytelling is not done through dialogue.
No, he's really good. He did a lot of early 30s Warner films.
So these men are all fools.
Yeah, definitely. Some of them are shown as more likable than others. Like John Wayne is just a moron.
They're all basically likable. They're not evil, mean. They're not cruel. They're suckers. And as she says at one point, you're only thinking of me in one way. That's all you actually want. You want it a lot.
She's interested in them as long as they can further her goals.
Remember, she has a philosophy. It's been laid out for us, and she's following this to the letter.
Yeah, she's instrumentalizing her body and her appeal.
Yeah, and the men.
Well, of course, and patriarchy. She's putting it to work for her.
And it is emphasized that you're not going to climb the way this woman is on blowjobs alone. She is very smart and very capable, but also a woman from her background is not going to climb without them.
No, you've gotta have them in the mix. Douglas Dombreel, he is the mustache guy. He wants to get closer to her. He is in charge of the filing department. She ditches Wayne, and again, there's a chorus of office girls around saying, forget about it. She's
Don't you
risen
get
beyond
it?
you.
Don't you understand?
They have to
Wake
count
up.
you out before you know you're unconscious. One interesting thing is, now here is the first scene where you see it. She's got a kind of camaraderie with everyone except for these guys that she's got designs on. She talks about where to get a permanent with one of her coworkers. She's not in any kind of combative relationship with any women.
And the only way this works for her is if the gossip pool doesn't include the man who is the next level up.
Right.
So she's reliant on that. So the women aren't running around talking about her to, at least not to the higher level executives.
But she's friendly with them, and they like her, it seems. They don't dislike her. And also, working men, she's also friendly with.
And the cop, she has like an actual, or whoever he is, she continues to have a comradely relationship with him. She has a lot of camaraderie with everyone that she doesn't instrumentalize sexually.
Right, exactly. And that goes well with Stanwyck's reputation as well, because she's this insanely driven person who would want to work 24 hours a day on films and never leave the set and all of that, but universally beloved by all of the tech people.
Yeah, I'm sure interpersonally she was great.
Yeah, but also for cutting all welfare and all kinds of other
Politically
things.
noxious, yes.
Yeah. Dombreel, his story is very sad and short. He gets caught with his pants down in the ladies' washroom and is fired.
Right, and she keeps using gendered ideas about women to her own advantage.
She uses
melodrama tropes, basically.
She also uses a door in a sexual manner, but it's a lot less chic than an Ernst Lubitsch door. The next link on the chain is Donald Cook, I think the actor's name. He's the one with the fiancé.
Okay, fiancé guy.
He plays the straight arrow brother in Public Enemy. That's what I recognize him from.
Sure.
In this one, he's engaged to Margaret Lindsay, who is a favorite of mine. She gets almost nothing to do in this one except cry, but it's very early in her career. It's sort of indicative of the kinds of things that she would play maybe half the time at Warner Brothers, cheated on.
She even gets to play sexual second fiddle to Bette Davis.
Well, in many movies, yeah. Dangerous as well.
Ah, yes.
She's engaged to Frasha Tone in that one.
Dave knows
Jezebel.
I'm thinking about Jezebel.
Yeah.
Because I grew up with that movie.
This guy, though, she doesn't only hang out with him in bathrooms. They actually have some times at an apartment, sort of well-appointed apartment.
This still seems to be her own apartment, though. Though maybe she's getting some funding.
Well, obviously, it's a pretty nice apartment.
She's not kept yet, I don't think.
No, but she must be getting gifts.
Yes.
Yeah.
But then her next step is to become a kept woman.
Really engineered by her.
Yeah.
She thinks several moves ahead. She would be very good at chess.
At first she seems to just be reacting to what's before her, and you wonder if she can play a longer and a deeper game, but of course she can.
She can.
As long and as deep as it needs to be.
Henry Kolker is the next link in the chain. He's the father of the wronged woman and the boss of Donald Cook. So she has to maneuver things in such a way that understanding Grandpa is going to try moving into the slot that Donald Cook has been occupying.
And one way she does this is by throwing herself down on the couch in his office and crying with her legs crossed in an attractive way. He takes notice of this several times.
This guy he's so great, this actor. He's the dad in Holiday.
Oh, okay, sure. He's, much more of a heavy
Yes.
in that role. In this one, he's just another naive
He's a weird creep.
dupe. Well, he's duped by his own desire.
I mean, this is very dark. The man that he's going to marry his daughter to. He's like, we know we're all like this. It's not a problem. We just have to keep it under wraps a little more than you've been doing. And if you can't handle that, then I will take her on. That's how things progress. You know, these guys are taking things very seriously.
Well, they're starting to.
The first guy to take it seriously is Douglas Dombril. He shows up at her house and she won't let him in, and he goes away crying.
She's been toying too much with people's passions.
Yeah.
No, that's not her intention at all.
No, she's not a femme fatale in any way. She's not rubbing it in.
She doesn't want to exercise her power at all beyond just, getting what she needs from the situation.
Yeah.
Which is money.
Yeah.
A lot of money.
But there are casualties along the way, and it turns out that these two guys that we've been talking about, the fiancé and the prospective stepfather, are going to go down at once when word starts to get around that she's a kept woman.
Before that, though, we get the scene where he has set her up in a gorgeous new place, and they're having their little evening together. We've had the scene. We should talk a little more about the symbolic dimensions that Theresa Harris takes on. There's just this one tiny scene where Stanwyck tells Theresa Harris not to call her honey.
Yeah.
Keep that on the lowdown. And also we see a scene where Theresa Harris is going out for the night and she has just as many furs on as Stanwyck, so
she's sharing in the spoils.
She's made by day, and that basically involves being a wife to Stanwyck, right?
Yeah.
And, looking after the house and cooking for her and for her guests. But they're sharing, it appears, equally in the spoils, and the hint and the symbolism is that they have a queer relationship.
There's definitely been many readings of it.
Stanwyck is not enjoying sex with any of these men because that's not the point. So it wouldn't very well be surprising if she was instead enjoying sex not with men. She's sick to the gills of them, she says at the beginning of the movie, having had to deal with having sex with men that she doesn't want to have since she was 14.
Yep.
She's really sick of them, and yet she has to keep doing this.
She's been working hard. Yes, that's how she puts it.
So I think the lesbian reading is 100%, and that has an unfortunate ending, such that the ending of the movie, it's funny because in certain ways you can read this as actually being a more conservative movie as far as gender goes than Red-Headed Woman, and it all has to do with, it depends on how much weight you want to put on a movie's ending.
The thing is, they want to humanize this character, and the only way they can think of to do that is to make her actually care about a man.
Right, and as in some of the Sternberg movies, lesbianism, hints of lesbianism come to symbolize hating men.
Yeah.
And so Theresa Harris is sent off on a cruise by herself at the end of the movie. Launched like Gerald at the end of Woman of the Year.
Well, yeah, it's a more pleasant launch than Gerald gets.
Well, the last moment is that Stanwyck screams at her and leaves her standing there.
Right.
Leaves her on the boat.
Yeah, she's on a boat to Europe rather than off the balcony like Gerald.
It's not pleasant, though.
No.
That's because she's serving this symbolic role that doesn't necessarily have to make sense naturalistically.
That's right. It's like halfway through the movie, this scandal occurs, a double murder in her bedroom. It's plastered all over the newspapers, kind of reached the end of her rope. She can't go any higher, everyone's dead, and she's going to sell her story to the newspaper. That's where she's reached when there's a board meeting convened.
It's also important that, her reaction or choice to have a non-reaction, her career now has a body count, right? And she has to steel herself against this, because she does have some responsibility in this situation. She has been using and exploiting people. I don't think she should feel guilt.
Yeah, and
she should feel sad.
Yeah,
I think the movie thinks she should feel human emotions.
Maybe, but the movie does not ever make you feel like she's actually responsible or she's guilty of their deaths. They're
Just that it's
responsible for it
Yeah,
themselves.
but just that it's a sad thing that she could react to as something sad, but she does not.
She doesn't. The board meeting is fascinating. For one thing, it's got Van Helsing there, the actor who played Van Helsing in Dracula.
Now that she's reached this level, Stanwyck's sexuality is actually rocking capitalism itself.
Yeah, it is. A new board director is going to be needed, and they decide to make the bold choice and bring in George Brent, who is kind of an untried maverick.
And a playboy.
Yes.
A young and handsome, by Warner's standards, playboy.
I love George Brent. I think he's great. And I think he really does wonders. Not easy to come in halfway through the film, take up residence in it.
George Brent is sort of anti-charismatic, but at the same time, he is a very sensitive actor.
He's great. I don't understand the lukewarm feelings people have about this guy.
He can feel very wooden.
I mean, he's in so many good movies. It's true that he doesn't pull attention from his female co-stars.
Yes, that's true.
But that's exactly why he was so beloved. Like, he's in all those Kay Francis movies, all those Bette Davis movies, and it works beautifully. And it works beautifully here, too. The world's first meet cute, which occurs during an attempt to blackmail a bank board of directors. Because that's really what it is, right?
Of course it is. And it's also notable for, the beginning of the board meeting, there's a shot, like a low-angle shot. There's some interesting shots and camera moves in this movie.
Yeah.
A low-angle shot showing this giant ceiling above the table. These are all old white men, and the movie is very well aware of that.
Yeah.
And so it's like the only way a woman is going to get a seat at this board is by doing the kind of shit that Barbara Stanwyck has done.
Yeah.
The only way to wield any power at this level is by what she has done.
That's right. George Brent, I think it's important to say, he doesn't have any moralistic judgments. He's kind of been living a similar kind of life without the economic imperatives that have been driving Barbara Stanwyck. He thinks of it all as a game. So he's moving into this new job. He's got to do something impressive. So he calls her on her bluff because she is trotting out all of these explanations for why she needs $15,000 from them.
When she talks about her diary, about her adventures, only of her time at the bank, that she's going to publish.
That's not good for the bank.
It made me think about Catherine the Great, although this does predate Scarlet Empress by a year. The movie ostensibly based on the diaries of Catherine the Great.
That's right. So he says, no, look, we'll set you up. We'll give you a job in Paris. You can change your name. Everything will be fine. You don't have to publish your story in the newspaper. So if you're really the upstanding person you pretend to be, here's your chance. And she takes it.
Yeah, and I wondered about that. Why she doesn't just go ahead and get the money from the paper, but it's because she's miffed that he's the first person to ever call her bluff, to be shrewd enough. And so she decides she's going to stick to this job and prove him wrong just for that. Just for the sake of it.
So she becomes a raging success in the Paris bank.
Well, because
out of spite.
Because she's very brilliant.
Yeah.
But she would never have had this opportunity, again, other than the way she has climbed.
Right. And again, everyone at the Paris office likes her, and she hasn't been sleeping with anyone. She doesn't go out. She doesn't do anything except focus on work there.
Yeah.
And finally, the big day comes. The CEO comes to visit their branch, and he's shocked to find that she's still there. And this really interests him.
I think this was another long game. She has hoped that this was going to happen.
Yeah, well, it was a meet cute, planting a seed that will blossom into something, and both sides are supposed to have some idea of it when it happens.
And she does engage in a bit of her usual trickery.
Oh, yeah, well, once he's there and he's noticed her again, and she realizes, the game is still on, then all of her senses are functioning at top level.
Yeah, and so she plays the cab trick to get him to drive her home. And she decides she is not going to sleep with him, because she's after marriage now. One world left to conquer. Exactly. Not after marriage in the way that Jean Harlow was, almost as an afterthought. She's not desperate for this. This was not her end game. Her end game was just to have more business opportunities and get more money.
As she says, you can marry me and divorce me later. That's no problem.
Again, a lot of this has been improvisation. She can do a long game, but she is working with the materials that come to her.
But they do have a good chemistry, I think. And it's kind of believable that this is different.
Yeah. Well, he is young and handsome.
Sure.
So that's one thing. Although so was the guy with the fiancé, but he had a fiancé. But this guy also, again, as you said, he is living the kind of lifestyle where she doesn't have to hoodwink him.
No, he's very playful as well. He's had sex
Necessarily.
with plenty of people. He doesn't think it's scandalous that she has a past. He finds it fascinating. He did just want to have sex with her. He never thought of getting married. But when she brings it up, it finally clicks that I guess that's what we'll do.
And he says he's madly in love with her, but
Yeah, I think he is.
He's just not necessarily needing this to go in the heteronormative marriage direction in any kind of urgent way either.
Once he does that, all hell breaks loose. There's a news story that travels around the world, gets to New York very quickly.
And I'm assuming the whole context of this is the Depression.
Well, yeah, the bank is failing already. I don't think that his marriage caused the bank to go out of business, but...
It doesn't project the right image, as the board is saying.
Right. It's not going to help them to get a bailout.
Yeah.
For this kind of thing to be going on. Bad news all around. He's summoned back to New York. They tell him what's up. They're all going to jail, or possibly.
Now, the TCM summary of this in their article said that he was embezzling money for her. Did you see that happen? Plays it like that didn't happen, and I believed him.
Yeah, I don't think that we're meant to think that he was actually embezzling.
Because he says we can fight this.
Yeah, look, they just lost a lot of money. And I think most of them got out of it, just as they did in 2008, but there were criminal charges looming over lots of people as these failures occurred. So it's not unbelievable that this would have happened.
Sure.
Probably wasn't just going and shoving his fist into the vault and taking out money. It's more a question of stocks that crashed and that kind of thing, and a cascading effect, and money just evaporates.
There is this extraordinary shot just before he comes and announces this to Stanwyck, where she is examining, she has this backless, I think that's one of the backless dresses, this backless, gorgeous Art Deco type dress. She's in the penthouse now, she's living in the penthouse. The shot comes, like, through the balcony, and we see her lounging around looking at her jewels and money with a jeweled bracelet on. It made me think of Max Ophuls.
Yeah. Yeah.
So this is Warner's going beyond its crime and prison dramas, its gangster dramas, and getting quite stylish.
There's $500,000 in this box, and I'm gonna get the other half, she says. So she's still got her eye on the main chance, not suspecting at all that a bunch of curveballs are going to come her way very shortly. When George Brent arrives, he breaks the bad news that...
And he knows that they love each other, so he thinks it's obvious that she's going to help him. And only George Brent could really play a scene like this where he just thinks it's obvious that she's going to help him out of the situation, because it is kind of a big ask.
Yeah. I need $500,000. I need that box.
Come on,
full
sweetheart.
of your treasure that you've accumulated over the years.
Well, most of it is stuff he gave her.
Not all of it,
He says
though.
I need it back.
Yeah, but I think it's more than that. And of course, she invested a lot to get there beforehand.
Oh, yeah.
A lot of
she's
emotional...
Well, not emotional. She has been letting gross men have sex with her.
Well, that's what I'm calling emotional labor, but it's more than that.
It's
obviously.
also physical labor.
Yeah.
Labor, man.
She's been keeping touch with her mentor over the years as well. She gets Nietzsche books in the mail from him with underlined passages urging her not to relent in her quest for the top and not to let any sentiment or...
Crush. The word crush is used in this movie, and frequently smash and crush are used in Employee's Entrance.
It's true. I mean, again, the movies go seamlessly together. They are definitely the product of one studio's attitude, very cynical attitude towards the economic system that they are working under. She really has to remain true to this project. She has to tell him to go to hell and go to jail. And it really is presented like this moral choice where, you know, he's asking her to compromise. He's asking her to do something that almost seems immoral at this point, which is to actually care about someone other than herself.
Well as terrifying. Like, you can see that her terror is still there, and she says that if I give you all this stuff,
then I'm gonna go right back to being a 14-year-old girl at the bar.
Yeah, and I thought that was, like, kind of fascinating to think about.
It is.
In that it's not just her thinking of the way that she was exploited then, because she's still being exploited now, just more to her own advantage, just taking a bigger cut.
Yeah.
But it's like, for the critique of capitalism here is that she thinks that she is somebody. She has an identity that is worthwhile as long as she's got jewels and furs on, right?
Sure.
And if you don't have that, you are nothing.
Yeah, you're an easy prey for any creep who comes along.
Yeah, but also you're just nothing in yourself. It's not situational, it's identity.
Yeah, it is. She remains firm, takes off on him, and says she's going to Europe with Chico.
And that's why I think that it was an important moral line to cross when those two guys, well, the one guy killed himself and the other guy over her, in that her career has now, as a consequence, you can say she's not responsible, but as a consequence has accumulated bodies. Well, it's about to accumulate another one that means a lot more to her.
Yeah, exactly. And she's going to have to face that, and if she's going to be 100% consistent, she should accept that while he was weak, he needed to die.
And this is the difference between this character and the character in Employee's Entrance, is that he does accept those consequences, even of himself. But she has a change of heart.
Yes.
Almost too late. Maybe too late.
She has a flashback sequence. She sees the faces of all these men.
And she also sees him saying a line of dialogue that I don't think we actually heard.
What was it?
In real time, in non-flashback, when he says that he accepts her past.
Oh yeah, that's right. That's true. That wasn't actually shown the first time, no.
Yeah.
Then she says, "Shut up! Stop singing our anthem!" And she leaves Chico on the transatlantic cruiser and heads back to the bank. Frantic search for him.
Of course, Chico has a lot of, at the very least, probably a bank account.
Well, yeah.
And a lot of clothes and furs, so hopefully she'll be okay. It is sad that
she'll be okay materially, of course
their relationship has to end in such a way.
And she goes back there, she can't find him, he's not where he's supposed to be, well maybe he's down there, they go to look for him, and he has shot himself, but not very well, apparently.
It's not that easy with a gun, it's just actually not that easy. There's a lot of failures, apparently, in real life. I have heard that somewhere. Don't try it!
No, don't. They summon the ambulance, and there is a tearful recognition scene on the ambulance as he comes to and realizes that she is there with him. She doesn't care that much about the jewels that have fallen on the ground. She says that doesn't matter anymore.
It does matter though, because they're gonna need those.
Yeah, they better pick that up. Otherwise they're not gonna be able to pay lawyers. They're not gonna work for sentiment. So
that's it. That's Babyface.
That's Babyface.
I would kind of like to move into the other movie, and maybe we could talk more about Babyface in relation to it. The men will exploit you if you don't exploit them. So that speech is probably quite important.
I don't see how the movie makes sense without that
why
scene.
She is operating the way that she is. Would anyone watching this necessarily know without context that it's a critique of capitalism?
I don't know. We're seeing the exploitation is going on at the macro level as well. Clearly the bank, Employee's Entrance does that in a lot more detail, I think.
Watching her, well, this is why I want to talk about it in relation to Employee's Entrance. Because there is just, and a lot of it has to do with gender, but there is just so much pleasure in watching her make her moves.
Sure.
Right?
Going up those floors.
Yeah. And the way that she's doing it, and the way that she is using things to her advantage that could work against her, right?
Yeah, and exposing hypocrisy.
Yes, exactly, right?
Of all of these men.
Yeah. And the world that they live in.
Especially Donald Cook. Donald Cook, though, I guess he does have the most pathos, because he does seem to be the most conflicted about the crazy life that he has decided to start leading. And
Which one is he?
Well, he's the one that commits the murder-suicide. He's really fucked up over this.
It's true. It's kind of like a life aporia for him. He is supposed to. The reason he fucks everything up for everybody is that he is supposed to just accept the way things are and not question them, and he's not supposed to be taking everything he's doing morally seriously.
Yeah, but we see that from the start. He fires Douglas Dumbriel immediately as soon as he finds him in the bathroom. And he's such a straight arrow, and everyone talks about him that way. His secretary is in awe of what a wonderful man he is. He's not like all these other people.
Oh, that's true.
I do believe this is probably the first time he has gotten out of line this way, and it has really disordered his brain.
And in another movie, the Stanwyck character would just be like, great, then marry me, and he would have been noble and said, yes, let's do that. But she's got a philosophy that she has to stick to.
Well, he's not the big fish. It's the father-in-law that's the biggest fish. So she actually forces things to a head, right? Because there's that scene where she stage manages everything so that they will be discovered in a clinch by his fiancé.
She totally does have, her philosophy has responsibility in playing with human emotions.
True. But again, yeah, I mean, who could predict that that guy would go on a killing spree?
Well, when you play with human emotions, sometimes that happens.
Killing sprees can occur.
Absolutely. Because we have to understand exactly how cruel this theory is. I mean, and that is an example that we're given of the cruelty of it. It's not just that you're having an affair with someone and then saying, I'm not interested anymore, it's over. You are doing this in the maximally cruelest way because you are purely using them instrumentally.
Yes, Kant says not to do that.
And this is why. There might be some dead bodies.
Kant versus Nietzsche.
So before we move on to Employee's Entrance, it is nicely instructive to use this movie, which was Warner's answer to Red-Headed Woman, to compare and contrast the two studios, which is that the Red-Headed Woman, Jean Harlow's character, the problem that the movie has with her is that she is a social climber and she is vulgar, and that's why she is bad. But her comic energy and the way she exposes the hypocrisy, even of the kind of life that MGM wants to celebrate, makes her such an attractive character that the movie actually rewards her by letting her get everything that she wants, while only kind of perfunctorily paying tribute to the values it's supposed to espouse. And in Babyface, the movie's problem with the way in which Barbara Stanwyck is operating is that she is buying into the values of a system that is itself inhuman.
Sure.
Doesn't have a problem with her social climbing per se, or obviously her class per se.
No, it definitely doesn't have that problem. It does believe that no one should ever have been placed in that situation in the first place. But that's the world that they're living in. Jean Harlow in Red-Headed Woman, it must be said, she does get a happy ending, but not in America. She has to go away and live that kind of life somewhere else. That's MGM's solution to her problem. Warner Brothers wants to keep things focused on the domestic scene, so they bring Stanwyck back from Paris for the finale, where she has to reintegrate into society.
That's interesting. Red-Headed Woman, also the ending is almost more like the ending of Employee's Entrance, in that Jean Harlow's character's punishment is that she is who she is.
But that's not such a bad thing. She's got her rich guy sponsoring the racehorse and her chauffeur as well.
Employee's Entrance makes you much more, well, I mean, the kind of viewers we are anyway, much more emotionally invested in the couple who is being destroyed by Warren William than you ever are in the couple who's being destroyed by Jean Harlow.
Well, yeah, for sure.
Even if they don't deserve to be shot at by a crazy platinum blonde.
Employee's Entrance, property it reminds me of more than anything else is the front page.
Okay.
He is Walter Burns.
Walter Burns doesn't rape anybody.
Sure he does. We just don't see it in the story, but you know he has.
You know he would.
He's a total sociopath.
Not as played by Cary Grant, but okay.
Okay, I'm talking about the front page. Cary Grant in His Girl Friday is a rapist.
Cary Grant would 100%
yes, he would.
rape anybody.
He's a
not the
monster.
Man. Not the man. We're talking about the performer's capabilities.
He's a monster in His Girl Friday. He's more inhumane than Adolphe Menjou in the Milestone film, I think. That's the kind of character that
He'd also poison his wife. That's why he's in suspicion.
So Warren William is playing, again, a person on a Nietzschean mission to prove himself to the world
and
to...
who has an overt philosophy that he is going to stick to the end.
All of this also goes back to A Christmas Carol.
Of course, I thought about Scrooge, definitely. This is a much more rapey Scrooge as well. But Warren William was not the first choice for the role. Some guy I've never heard of was, but it was
Who?
Hale Hamilton.
Oh, okay. Well, he's in the movie. He plays Mr. Monroe, the guy who's always off on his yacht. Mustache guy.
I don't remember him already. I've forgotten him already.
The owner.
Okay.
Two owner guys, right? Like the old white-haired guy who sticks around, and then the other guy who's only in the early scene and then leaves. Hale Hamilton is most famous, I think, these days, or anyway, to me, as the sanctimonious brother in I'm a Fugitive from a Chain Gang.
Oh, interesting. Wow. The role was turned down by many prominent actors, including, for obvious reasons, some of which we've already indicated, including Edward G. Robinson. Now, if Edward G. Robinson had played this role, I think the relationship with Loretta Young would have been way less ambiguous than it is, because the ambivalent attraction exerted by Warren William on the audience also extends to his very strange relationship with Loretta Young's character.
Warren William is a subject for many further discussions. Everyone should know about this guy. One of the very greatest actors of the studio era.
Dave loves him so much.
I do. He has the ability to play very, very straight arrow kind of characters and very, very morally compromised characters. Always very likable somehow.
Don't know if he's likable in this film.
You don't find him in... Well, it's enjoyable to watch him.
Sure. It's often enjoyable to watch a villain.
And you feel like you're on his side more than half the time, especially when he is dealing with the frustrations of upper management. Like the people that are the capitalist class,
This movie is really fascinatingly complex. Yeah, because he is right. He's actually right in his dealings with, not morally, but in his dealings with the underlings as well. And at certain point, to have Warner's examine this character in this way is just really fascinating. And at a certain point you recognize towards the end that he is trying to save this company from going out of business during the Depression. And as nasty as his interpersonal business dealings are, if the company goes out of business, all of the employees go to work, right? So he is... by his own lights, I think he thinks that overall, morally, the ends justify the means. Although, again, not in his dealings with women.
No, that's a different matter.
It's not a different matter, though.
It's
not a different matter because these things are all... The movie wants us to see his attitudes towards everything is related.
Yeah, I guess... Canfield didn't write this movie because he is in the exact position that Daryl Zanuck was in at Warner Brothers.
It's based on some play. It's a screenplay by Robert Presnell Sr., based on a play by David Bohm. I don't know anything about it. Robert Presnell Sr. doesn't even have a Wikipedia entry.
It's quite fascinating that Zanuck wrote the other one pseudonymously, but this one really is about Zanuck in terms of his business function anyway.
Well, and we had talked in another episode about Selznick coming into RKO and firing everybody.
No, but I'm talking about Warner Brothers in 1933. They reduced everyone's salary, Zanuck included, and then there was another round of cuts coming, and he said he wouldn't do it, and they wanted to do it anyway, so that's why he left.
Warren William, you think he's going to leave for moral reasons?
No, I'm not saying that. I'm just saying Warner Brothers was in the exact same financial situation as this depression-addled store is in the film.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the movie...
And he was not the actual owner either, so that's why, he felt like he just couldn't win in that situation and he wanted out.
And heads of production pretty much exactly are in this sort of position, with the difference that they're not dealing with the ownership class in Hollywood was not a WASP elite.
We get a montage to start the film. We see the development, the incredible progress of this store, which was built up from a small department store to like Macy's level of success.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden the Depression hits and all of those gains start to erode. And we see all the profit figures. They go up and then they start to go down.
And when capitalism is functioning well for the capitalists, they can just sit back and relax and the money they are born with just keeps piling up. But when things take a downturn, then you need somebody who actually knows what the hell they're doing. But he's not simply making cuts.
No, of course not. That's the argument, right? And again,
Exactly.
I think that is...
It's an anti-austerity movie, actually.
It really is. Yeah, we need big ideas that cost money that are going to make money. That's what he says. That's the New Deal philosophy. It's very Keynesian, right? You keep the juices flowing. You don't retract.
But his thing is that we need efficiency and no dead weight. So that's why everybody is getting fired.
No, the only people he fires are people that are actively fucking up the business. They're not...
Oh, but that's everybody. Because he will fire somebody for a mistake. Or take a grand piano out of their tiny salad.
He didn't fire that Alan Jenkins, but yes,
he did something practically worse.
Pretty nasty.
He's now an indentured servant.
Yes. The man that he fires, Higgins, the former assistant who is mostly in charge, or anyway, the discussions are all about menswear, which has taken a big hit during the Depression. He is really an obstacle. He is trying to stonewall any changes.
I don't think so.
Yeah, he says...
No. He's just not generating ideas.
No, at the meeting he says, these are not the store's values, this is not what we do.
Yes, but he can't stop anybody. If they just override him, he doesn't have to be fired and made an example of.
Well, I guess that's true, but that's what happens. He gets 1 year's salary.
So you agree with this? This is what you would do?
I would take that guy out of that job, for sure, because he doesn't want to do anything. He just wants to ride out the Depression doing the same things that they were doing before. The ideas do sound good, right? I mean, if you're following the capitalist logic, and in a board meeting everyone is supposed to be thinking about how do we change our fate.
Yes, but obviously the alternative here that is shadowing every action that Warren William takes is to have a compassionate form of capitalism that continues to employ people simply out of loyalty and doesn't ruin people's businesses because they can't fulfill an order due to unforeseen circumstances.
Yeah, well, we'll talk about that guy. That's another case
Anyway,
entirely.
what I found interesting about this, like, clearly you simply agree with Warren William and would do the exact same thing and have no regrets.
Well, I would never be in Warren Williams' position because I don't want to fire anyone ever.
Anyhow, what I found fascinating was that in the scene itself, as a person who works in retail, unfortunately, in the scene itself, I completely agreed with Warren Williams. He's right. But when you see the consequences for this person who's worked there forever in the middle of a depression and doesn't even have any wife and children, that's what the scene is for.
Yes, it's crushing to see this poor old man. They cast this really wonderful actor I've never seen in anything else, or I don't remember seeing him in anything else, but
This job is this man's life. And there's no attempt here. There is no attempt here. Like, I don't even know what the labor laws or if there was were at the time, or if there was a lot of poetic license taken in this movie, or if labor laws were really that shitty in America in 1933. They probably were. But there's no attempt here. Like, now in corporate...
Well, no, this guy's an executive. Don't forget that. They don't have labor laws for executives. He gets a golden parachute. He got paid a year's salary at $15,000. You know how much that is?
Yes, but this... store is his identity. This job is his identity.
Yeah, but labor laws don't
point.
Protect your identity for executives. They're getting fired like that all the time.
What I'm saying is, in North America now, there would be more than a 3-second conversation. Maybe this is the Depression pressure, though. More than a 3-second conversation before this guy was fired. There would be an attempt for him to come on board. But I guess the idea is that in these circumstances, we cannot afford to have a longer conversation about this.
Right, and it's an economically presented scene. You get the sense that Higgins has been doing this to him for years, right? Like, he is one of these people like Bill Docker in Christmas in July that has just been driving the boss crazy with his stubborn ways for years.
I don't know. I don't think so. I don't get that sense at all. I get the sense that William is hair trigger whenever anyone does something that goes against his philosophy of efficiency.
Right. Well, that's true too, of course.
And we see that probably 24 times in the movie. Constantly illustrated.
The most schematically presented one is the supplier of coats who explains that he has to make a deal that he really isn't equipped to fulfill in order to secure future business of Monroe.
Right, he's breaking even on this order.
And he says he's been having labor difficulties, so he can't even deliver what he promised. And Warren William is like, all right, cancel the contract, you're fucked.
And we'll sue you.
The suing just is like gratuitously added on because there's not going to be anything to sue him for. The guy's bankrupt, he says that already.
No, it's just to make a point.
Yeah, he obviously doesn't do that because by the end that guy is working for him. So there clearly can't have been an actual lawsuit between them. But yeah, he says, I'd be within my rights to sue you, and that's what I plan to do, just to make you feel bad.
Right, this is my logic versus your logic.
Exactly. You just see that capitalism forces people to overextend themselves, and it creates waves of crisis, which we see, every 10, 15 years. Crashes, recessions, depressions, that's what happens, because it's all based on a con game that is going to be called every decade or so, and then everything starts back from scratch, practically.
Again, I'm going to go back and defend Higgins against you. I don't think he's an obstructionist. Warren William says himself, the problem with Higgins is that he is too old, he has outlived his usefulness, and when that happens to me, I will also jump out of a window.
Right.
But hopefully I realize that and kill myself before someone like me has to tell me that I no longer have a use. So
That's
the
true.
point of Higgins is that under the capitalist system, once you can no longer be productive because you've become too used to old ways of doing things, you should die. William also thinks that anybody that he crosses ought to kill him.
Yeah.
And invites them to do so.
He is a very consistent...
Like, by the end, he's operating like a capitalist machine that has broken.
Yeah.
And is, now working against itself.
It's incredible. This movie is one of the best. The other thing that we should mention...
Kurt Anderson is his character's name. It's hard for me to say Warren William a million times, so I should switch to Kurt Anderson.
Kurt Anderson. The other thing going on in that Higgins scene is that Kurt Anderson has identified Wallace Ford's character as good material for that spot. So he wants Higgins out of there, because he wants a new assistant.
Sure.
A young son. He keeps calling him that.
Yes, but a young son who's more like a lover without sex, who has to live like a monk. Or live like a monk except for occasional rape.
Yeah, well, he's the Hildy Johnson character, right?
Sure.
So that's the front page structure all over the place.
Except here it's evil. It's actually evil.
Well, it's
like
evil
this
in the front page,
This
too.
relationship between this homoerotic relationship is evil because it's not about being gay. It's about this patriarchal structure that is a foundation for capitalism, right? Where the men get together and have all of their feelings with each other and have no feelings for the rest of humanity.
Right. But again, the front page is also about that. Destroy heteronormativity, definitely, but only in the service...
But Howard Hawks took it back.
Only in the service of feeding the yellow journalism machine, right? Which is a terrible thing that helps capitalism steamroll everybody.
Well, here's another thing to talk about in terms of the front page in His Girl Friday and this movie, is that Warren William, Kurt Anderson, also thinks that employees should not have a private life. A private life should not exist. There should be no labor laws regarding hours. Employees should work 24/7. I'm not sure if they're getting paid for this or not. But regardless, they are to have no private time, and they cannot spend their money where they want to.
No. What kind of message does it send if you're buying your dresses on 6th Avenue?
Yeah.
Poor Ruth Donnelly, she should not have let that slip.
No, and he himself is a model of working, unless he's raping, at every moment. This is all his life is. And that is also what the romance of the front page is about.
Yeah.
Your identity entirely being your work.
Yeah, exactly. No, they're very closely related items, I think.
Except the front page is about the romance of that, not the horror movie version.
Well, I think the front page is...
It is kind of a horror
right,
movie,
I mean, what happens to Molly in that story is at the core of Milestone's movie anyway. That these people are responsible for a death.
Well, they're monsters even in the Hawks movie, but the fact that it is an exciting adventure of a career, that's ultimately what's most important.
Obviously, it's more romantic to write for a newspaper than to run a department store. But probably both of
Warren
them
William makes it look pretty romantic to run a department store.
It is big, important work. He makes it clear 12,000 people work for this company.
There's also an obvious relationship with the role that the woman plays in this movie to the apartment. In that your choices between being a human being as exemplified by your treatment of women and your relationship with women, as opposed to having a success under the terms of the business world, which is also homosocial.
Let's get to Loretta Young.
Yeah, this is a whole separate topic, but as we said, related. On a second viewing, this relationship is mind-blowingly ambiguous. So when I read summaries of it on internet articles of the plot of this movie, including the scenes with Loretta Young, those summaries show the idiocy of writing or speaking about movies in a plot recap way, because many elements of many movies, and some entire movies, Susan Sontag talks about this in her article on Bergman's Persona, are irreducibly ambiguous, and you cannot therefore subject them to a plot summary.
Right.
And clearly, that is what they intended for these scenes, because if he is supposed to be straightforwardly a rapist, there's no reason under the code why that couldn't have been more clear. If it's supposed to be a straightforward relationship where she is willing to sleep with him for work purposes, again, there's no reason that couldn't have been clear. So evidently they wanted this ambiguity.
Yeah, why do they have such a charming meet-cute scene between them otherwise? The movie, it's 75 minutes long and it contains multitudes. It has Warren William just going mental on everyone, the capitalist machine at work, as you say. Strolling around after midnight in his department store empire, he happens upon this idyllic moment, a refugee from the world outside, the Depression. She's holed up in one of these model houses playing the piano, and he just walks in and they just have a very nice time. She shows him around this fake house and offers him some wax food, papier-mâché food.
Loretta Young is just very, very charming.
She really is.
In this movie, whenever she's not really stressed out.
Yeah.
So yeah, they have this meet cute, and then
he just finds her doesn't act, not until the end of this particular phase of their relationship does he suddenly become predatory.
A monster.
Is so shocking and horrible, because it seems like we're seeing a different side of him for so long, and then he just switches gears again.
The reason I was thinking of this, there's not any kind of huge relationship, but I was thinking of the Weinstein talk in relation to this character, just because he had a reputation, Harvey Weinstein had a reputation for being horrible at work in general, and a particular special instance being sexually harassing and sometimes violently raping women who worked for him, actresses. But he was in general an intimidating and terrifying and cruel person.
Yes.
Right? So these practices were all related to each other.
Sure.
But yeah, okay, so let's actually talk about this movie. The ending, yeah, so he feeds her and gives her $10, and she seems to sincerely want to just pay him back in money and not in sex.
Yeah.
And be on her way out the door, and then he shuts the door and kisses her, and she says no, but she doesn't look particularly terrified. It's very ambiguous. Afterwards, when she is discussing him with her new boyfriend, she talks about him like he's a brute and a monster, though, which makes you wonder exactly what happened and how she sees it.
It's definitely an aporia there. She's on the surface talking about his business practices.
But you know from what happened that there is more to this.
Yeah, it's very difficult to parse.
And then we get an extended scene between them, which
Right.
is even crazier.
Well, okay, a lot of things happen in between those two, right? So Wallace Ford comes to prominence at the store, takes Higgins' spot, and he's been told that if you want to do this right, if you want to really study under me and maybe take my place someday, you're going to have to forego some of the pleasures that the plebes enjoy. So no weddings for you, no private life for you. In fact, it would be better if you just got a hotel room next to mine. In any event, you have to be available at all times. Wallace Ford can't really do that.
And, like, the language is sexual.
Yeah, I want you near me all the time. Like it.
Yeah, and be on call for me, and...
Yeah, booty call, business call. But no, Wallace Ford has also, unbeknownst to Kurt Anderson, has fallen in love with the Loretta Young character, who is starting out as a model.
And they are keeping their relationship on the quiet because he knows that William does not want him to.
He won't get to keep this new job and stay on the trajectory that he's on if it's shown right off the bat that he's disobedient.
And then there's this giant drunken employee ball.
The backstory to all of that, she knows what Kurt Anderson is like, so that makes her fairly understanding of Wallace Ford's subservience to him. But eventually she's almost had enough.
I do think you have to feel like he is so dominating that it would be hard for a person of a normal level of assertiveness to get out of any situation where he really wanted something.
Yeah, exactly.
Whether that involves physical violence, we don't know.
Right. They do get married. It's a ceremony with no invitees. This is definitely not known to all of the other employees at the store. The marriage has friction in it from the start, and it's just getting worse and worse because Wallace Ford never comes home.
Right, and there may be an additional level to this of her feeling like she has been raped by this man that he is now spending all of his time with.
Yeah, that's gotta be awkward. It comes to a head at the employees' party, which Warren William doesn't even want to occur. He's very annoyed that he can't have everyone working on a special project that night. He says, no, come hang out with me from 6 o'clock onward. We'll go to the party together. I mean, again, he doesn't know that Wallace Ford is married, so he just figures he's not escorting anyone to the party, but it does cause problems. It causes a big fight, and for both married partners to get drunk.
But the thing is, she's not drunk initially when she meets up again with Warren William.
No, that's true.
So again, this is a highly strange, on both of their parts, and ambiguous scene. He encounters her sitting off on her own after this fight. He starts
plying her with liquor.
No, that's not what initially happens. He just starts talking to her, and she tries to get away, like she doesn't like him very much.
Right.
And then he says to her, "Are you scared of me?" And she turns around and smiles at him flirtatiously and says, "No, I'm not."
Yeah.
And it's as simple as that, and they sit down and talk. So her initial decision to stay with him, as played, seems to be that she is attracted to him, despite whatever happened to them before. It's not played like she feels pressure to stay because he's the boss.
That's true.
At all. But then, despite getting what someone might interpret as good signals from her, he doesn't simply flirt with her or try to seduce her like a normal human being.
No.
He gets her drunk, tricks her, and rapes her while she's unconscious.
Very bad.
The hell?
Yeah.
Why?
There's no defending this behavior.
Why? What has happened? What's going on here? What is happening with these characters? Do you understand? And yet it seems to me like totally plausible.
Yeah, of course it does. I mean, he has told everyone that will listen, he's got his philosophies that there's no time for any of the traditional things that go on between real people outside of the business hours. So he's got this one party night to maybe have some sex and get that over with again, and this is what he decides to do. She does keep asking him, why me? Why not just find someone else? And he does have a particular fixation on her.
Well, he tells her it's because you're very attractive, and, well, that's later in his office. You're very attractive, which she is. There's something between us, which seems right from what we've seen, but then he touches her, and she tells him to get away from her.
Sure. Well, wouldn't you? I mean, his behavior has not been good.
Yeah, whether there's any attraction here or not, after that gross trickery.
It really is a trick, too, because he tells her you can go up to room 1032, and we see room 1032, it's like Lynchian, the way the door, the looming numbers on the door.
And he obviously has this set up for this purpose because he's going to rape somebody tonight.
Possibly that's what he does every office party, yeah.
And it's not like these girls can leave these jobs in the middle of the Depression. And by the time he tells, like, I've seen her described as naive in plot summaries, but the point is that by the time he tells her to go upstairs, she's so drunk she has no idea what she's doing.
No, exactly. It's a very good drunk performance by Loretta Young. Very funny, anyway. Like, especially when she almost tries to pop a balloon which turns out to be a bald guy's head.
So the tone,
that is so funny.
The darkly comic tone in this scene is really something too.
It is.
You feel from her popping performance that there is an underlying feeling that probably began with whatever happened with them in the first place and is continuing through this rocky relationship with her husband of self-destructiveness.
Sure. Well, the marriage has self-destructed. They've had a terrible fight that it doesn't seem like they're going to get over. They're going to be able to fix anyway. And Wallace Ford is off getting hammered. Although, yeah, the movie really plays it safe with him and he just passes out. He doesn't have any kind of encounter of his own.
No one is waiting to rape him.
No, but he doesn't get out of line with anybody either.
Yes, well, neither does she, really.
No.
That's not what happens.
No, it's designed to make you maximally uncomfortable, all of this stuff.
Yeah. Yeah.
The next morning, she is writing a letter to her husband explaining that she's no good because she became a victim of Warren William, basically. I mean, she doesn't put it that way because she is still laboring under very retrograde attitudes towards sex. Sex occurred, so it's her fault. That's how she's taking responsibility for it.
And possibly there is some kind of attraction that she feels responsible for. Who knows?
But she is not responsible for the sex that happened that night because she wasn't conscious.
That's what we're visually told.
Yeah.
She doesn't open her eyes after he enters the room, so...
Now, all of that becomes unnecessary because Wallace Ford doesn't know that she wasn't at the apartment. He fell asleep himself at the party and never woke up until the next morning, so she tosses that letter aside. But of course, all of the angst that went into it is still eating at her. It comes to a head not too much later when there's more of this eternal
badgering
struggle with the domineering Kurt Anderson, who wants everyone's time. She
Well,
goes
he
to
also-
see him and tries to...
He decides to break up their marriage after she blurts it out
Yeah.
that they're married, and he decides, this isn't going to work with his plans for his son, and he has the means to break it up, so he just has to get her to admit it so that her husband can hear.
It's kind of astounding as well because she goes to fight with him about the annoying things he's doing to her marriage. She doesn't even feel, I guess, like she's got the cultural language for actually accusing him of rape, which you think, if this happened now, hopefully someone would do that.
I mean, yeah, I imagine...
That doesn't come up in their conversation. It's obviously in the back of both of their minds that this terrible thing has happened, but they can't actually name it what it is. So the fight is all about what he's doing to Wallace Ford.
I mean, I imagine the fact that she went to his room is what is causing her confusion.
Well, yeah, and it probably wouldn't have gone anywhere in court. They just would have said, well, she deserves it, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
That's the
of course.
attitude that was prominent at the time and still halfway prominent now, unfortunately. Although less so every year. Hopefully that will continue. She really makes a mistake there, and Warren William is now on to this trick that has been pulled. You'd think he would know about it already.
Like I said, nobody mentions... Well, I've only read a couple of summaries of this online. It's not a very well-known movie, but nobody mentions rape.
Really?
No, one person says she's passed out. I think this is in the Wikipedia entry. She's passed out in his room and he has sex with her.
Well, that's...
that would be rape.
Pretty Cosby.
But nobody uses the word. So they themselves are apparently confused by this situation, and that's why we continue to have legal problems over rape, because everybody's more confused than they really need to be.
The depression is worsening throughout, and the bankers are threatening to come in. Now, again, this is what Hollywood studios were dealing with. We're going to see...
We should also talk about his relationship with the other woman.
For sure we will, but let's do the depression first.
All right.
Paramount went into receivership, Fox went into receivership, Warner Brothers did, all of them at the mercy of bankers. And Universal in 1936, as we mentioned a few times, and we'll certainly talk about when we get to that year on the calendar, it's going to be completely annihilated and taken over by bankers for good.
Oh, I was going to say, there was speculation when the movie was released as to what store it was referring to, but you're right, it could just as easily have been referring to a studio.
Well, it is, for sure. It's got to be.
Because this guy is like a head of production.
He really is. A Thalberg or Zanuck style head of production who is obsessing on every detail of every production in the store, every department in the store.
Yeah, that makes sense. And also how to sell everything.
The bankers coming in, and again, as you put earlier, this is austerity. All the bankers care about is the bottom line. They don't care about any kind of prestige associated with a business or any other finer feelings that come into enterprise. It's all about nickels and dimes, and the easiest way to make sure that you don't lose money is to stop paying money to people. So a lot of firings with no imagination going into the onward functioning of the store.
And he thinks that will be the end of the store.
Yeah, I mean, and so does his enemy, white-haired guy that is just a buffoon who reads telegrams from the other buffoon who's off on a cruise, an endless cruise with royalty.
Right, and who plays chess all the time with Alice White.
Yeah, Monroe and Ross, is that the name of the store? So it's Ross is the guy? Yeah, it's Ross. So yeah, Mr. Ross, who has been operating at cross purposes from the beginning with Kurt Anderson. In that first scene where we're first introduced to everybody, Ross is proposed as the guy that will watch over Kurt Anderson's shoulders to make sure that he doesn't do anything too crazy in the name of his personal business philosophy.
So
And
Warren
Williams says, no, forget it. I operate everything my way, or I'm leaving for your closest competitor.
Right, but he also starts pimping Polly Dale to him to keep him from watching over his activities.
Yeah, that's Alice White, wonderful early 30s actress.
Apparently this was considered a comeback role for her, but there was some scandal she got involved in afterwards, and her career did not continue after this comeback.
Yeah, she's in some fun movies. She's in Picture Snatcher. That's a great movie.
She feels like they imported a bit of Gold Diggers of 1933 into this movie.
Sure.
With her storyline.
And again, we've got female solidarity. She likes Loretta Young and makes a stand in her behalf when she is enlisted to break up the marriage.
And although he does get the upper hand on her in the end, because he does with everybody, she seems to be able to handle Warren William better than anybody else.
Well, she
and
speaks his
anybody
language.
else.
He says, when they first have the scene together, he says, you've been trying to get my attention for a long time now. Well, here's your chance. I want you to go play up to Ross and keep him out of my hair. He's got little missions for her.
She's actually more like Hildy Johnson. No. She's like one of the mafia thugs that do little jobs.
Yeah, exactly.
For Walter.
Yeah, like Louis.
Yeah.
I like her character a lot. She's also a model.
There is female solidarity, but it doesn't do much to help these women.
Not really, no.
We've heard about how Warren William dips into the pool of models on a regular basis, and there's nothing they can do about that.
No, except, I guess, warn each other about it. Like, if he comes for you and you don't want this to happen, I guess you have to quit. That's your only option.
Yeah, and that's not an option right now.
No, not in the Depression.
But yes, Polly has actually been wanting this to happen.
Everything comes together in this financial crisis activated situation where the bankers are planning to vote Warren William out. They want to do things their piddling way. And the only way to get out of this is to have the Commodore actually pick up the telegrams that have been sent to him and reply that he will devote his shares to keeping Warren William on the job. The board meeting, this is one of those movies that a lot of it depends on a suspenseful board meeting or potential board meeting, right down to the wire. They're not hearing back from him. He's cruising the Mediterranean. He's got other things on his mind. Warren William is starting to think, well, that's it. I'm out. I'm now obsolete. I'm just like Higgins.
And Warren William, incidentally, speaking of MRAs, that's who he talks like.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of actual force behind it because Warner Brothers' 30s attitude towards women often is like this. They are just parasites. Keep away from them. But not always.
Yeah,
they can be good. Speaking of Gold Diggers of 1933, that's probably the pinnacle of Warner Brothers' 30s feminism.
Sure, and Babyface.
Sure, yeah, after a manner, yeah.
Again,
but that's not so cheerfully feminist as Gold Diggers of 1933.
No, but it's all showing us, it's giving us a very clear explanation of why women might adopt this attitude towards sexual relations as mercenary, because they're living in a world that doesn't allow them any opportunity to think of it otherwise.
Yeah, but I'm just saying Warner Brothers isn't always good at that.
That's true. But no, this one definitely gives us two very likable female characters who have totally different attitudes and experiences with sex.
Sure.
Warren William, yeah, he's saying they're all like Polly, all men are interchangeable to them.
He says at one point to Martin, they make you a slave.
That's right. That's what he says.
You're just going to be working for those women.
He feels like he's saving, and that's how Walter Burns talks as well, right? You're going to become henpecked. You're going to be a husband in the suburbs.
Right, which becomes very funny when it's applied to a woman.
Right.
You're going to become a henpecked wife.
Yeah, and she certainly would be with Ralph Bellamy and his mother.
Yeah, so here's a question. Kurt Anderson is also given a sympathetic backstory as to how he became such a monster.
Yeah, grew up in hard circumstances on a farm in Ohio.
Why is it less fun to watch him do these terrible things to people than it is watching Stanwyck with her men? What do you think? It really just comes down to how we read gender in movies?
Well, I think that's a lot of it, but the movie also, again, is...
That it's almost always punching up if it's a female character.
And in this movie...
He does punch down a hell of a lot.
Well, he does, yeah. Higgins and the clothing supplier...
Although, as you point out, Higgins is an executive.
Yeah, he's not like a little grunt.
But the clothing designer is pretty bad. Actually,
well, that clothing designer, don't forget.
He comes back, so we have to talk about when he comes back.
Yeah, he is not like a little guy either. He's got a little business compared to the department store, but he says he's been having labor troubles, so he's an exploiting capitalist.
Sure, but he's going to be out of business, and he probably has a family, and the next thing we see, he's working in the shipping department.
Yeah.
And it's the Depression.
I know. But
I mean,
just
it's lucky
saying,
he got a job in the shipping department.
Sure, but I'm just saying, he's been cracking down on his own employees and acting like a monster, probably, because why else would he be having all these labor troubles?
So you don't want any small business sentimentality?
I don't feel that there's any necessary need for it, especially if he tells you, we've had work stoppages at my business. He's probably done something to deserve it, right?
Now, what happens with him is that he comes back and he says...
He's going to follow the philosophy.
I don't know how he's been treating his employees, but he expected that he would be treated better in his business relationship than he was by Kurt Anderson. But now he knows that there is no loyalty among thieves.
That's right.
And therefore, he is going to learn how to be just like Kurt. Learn how to be an Ubermensch.
He is the success story.
And he fucking hates Anderson now. He won't take anything from him.
Right.
And that makes Anderson love him.
He does, yeah, because Anderson is like, you've learned the lesson, this is wonderful, I'm glad I didn't even have to sue you to teach you the lesson.
I'm going to invest in you now. And it's not charity. It's that he's reproduced himself.
Yeah.
It's a form of sterile reproduction.
Yeah, well, that's what he's interested in, right? Like, he's not just interested in his own business achievements. He wants a legacy.
He's not even interested in his own gain. He isn't even after money anymore. He doesn't even make sense. He doesn't want sex. He's not like Stanwyck. He doesn't want sex. He doesn't want money.
No, he just wants to embody his idea of a consistent manager. Not even a capitalist, right? Someone working for capitalists. This is how they should operate.
Well, yeah, because it's true that capitalism, as he points out, what exact form of capitalism, I wonder, does he represent? Because capitalism itself, because it has all these stupid WASP shareholders and people who have no function other than prestige and all of this dead weight of employees who have been around for centuries, is not efficient. Capitalism is not efficient at all. So what kind of capitalism does he represent?
Yeah, the managerial class, right?
And they have to kind of function against the system because they're operating according to a sort of smooth, frictionless logic within a system that actually is extremely dysfunctional and doesn't work.
All these people who have money for no reason, they didn't earn it, they accumulated it during feudal times. And have passed on the money to their descendants. They are the ones that are making all these decisions, and they don't know how to run any businesses. They have to hire Warren William to do it for them. The most enlightened ones, the best they can do is know that.
So do you actually, with your more sophisticated understanding of capitalism than mine, do you actually find pleasure, a comparable pleasure, in watching Warren William destroy these small or medium business owners to watching Stanwyck toy with the lives of these rapacious men?
No, you can't do that because there is pathos invested in it. But I'm just saying...
Yeah, I mean,
really
maybe you're right. Maybe it's just the movie's attitude in that they're willing to extend pathos to these men and not to Stanwyck's victims.
No, those guys are buffoons. Except for George Brent.
And the dead bodies.
Wow.
You still think that's buffoonery?
Henry Kolker is a fucking buffoon.
Sorry, I would not have shed tears over them either, says Dave.
No, and that sanctimonious asshole, Donald Cook? No. But no, these guys, you do care about them, but it's also very funny. Like, just his decision to crack down and implement these ideas come hell or high water.
And he's always right. Like, if you watch this having served any management role in any monetary business, you know the feeling of this. you know how he feels.
Yeah.
Even though I'll never wield anything resembling his amount of power.
No, well, I hope not. Anytime there are communiques coming from the Commodore, whose entire function is to go meet people at the airport or boat.
No, that's delightful. Whenever he's punching those guys, that is delightful.
Yeah. That's how the movie keeps all of these plates in the air, and you are laughing with Warren William, you're disgusted with him.
And sometimes you're just bewildered by him, like when he wants people to shoot him.
At that point, when he wants to be shot, he thinks that he is going to be fired and will be, therefore, useless, an excrescence, and might as well jump out the window like Higgins, but if it's gonna help Wallace Ford to shoot him, why not? He sets everything up. It's with the same kind of audacity as Barbara Stanwyck designs her trap for Donald Cook and his fiancée. He's got Wallace Ford listening in as Loretta Young confesses that they had these terrible encounters.
He's hoping that he will get Martin on his side.
Yeah, exactly.
But if not, then at least he can get him to shoot him.
It's a win-win.
And then that being the final piece of the puzzle that doesn't fit together, that is Loretta Young's relationship with this guy, is that she takes poison, and that seems to signal to her husband, because how else does he come up with this interpretation that she was raped?
Yeah, hopefully that's what he figures out, but in any
that's how he acts. The problem is Warren William, not her. Like, he rushes off to kiss her and stroke her. He's not upset with her.
Of course, because he loves her and she's almost died. So I think that's the important thing. I don't know. Hopefully he has correctly understood that she didn't even want this sex to happen with Warren William, but either way, I don't think he cares anymore. He just wants her back.
Well,
alive.
no, I take it as that is the evidence that she didn't want the sex. The fact that she kills her, tries to kill herself. That in fiction, that is often the only evidence produced that a woman didn't want sex, is if she tries to kill herself.
Right, okay.
Then you know for sure.
She knows that their marriage is over, and that is depressing enough, possibly.
No. The chain of reactions involves this weird and awful relationship with Anderson.
Yeah, but she tries to poison herself after their marriage has dissolved. I mean, he says he's leaving the store because he's found out about it, right? That's when she tries to kill herself, not after the actual assault occurred.
Yeah, but would that be enough? Just the fact that her marriage is breaking up would be enough I don't think so.
It seems to be. Well, the fact that...
No, it's not enough.
The marriage
Again, I'm saying all of these events have happened, and that's what leads up to her
The fact that the marriage
suicide.
is breaking up, and that it is now public knowledge that she has been in this terrible thing with Warren William against her will. Well, it's... Her husband knows about it anyway, and he's quit, and obviously people are going to find out.
Yeah, but everyone knows that William is sleeping with everyone, so I don't think that in itself
To me, I think the movie's logic is that she just doesn't know what to do anymore.
Yeah, but I don't think she even knows how to interpret what has happened with Anderson.
That's already put her in a suicidal frame of mind, I'm sure, that she's been through these experiences, but the catalyst for actually drinking the poison is after the marriage dissolves.
Sure, that's fine.
Yeah.
I'm just saying that not everybody just drinks poison because their marriage isn't working out.
No, of course not. Of course not. No, she's already been placed in a very dire situation, and all she had left was her marriage, and now that's gone.
Sure.
For Wallace Ford, because he says, we can start over, it's been done. So he is kind of still talking like something happened there that he's not sure who's responsible for it, right? Because why would you say that? Would anyone say we can start over if someone's been beaten up? It's because he is probably still saying this is
Yes, but that's not how rape
infidelity.
was seen. Rape was seen
Well, that's what I'm saying.
Damaging the
That's
woman on a fundamental level, not like just being assaulted.
That's right, that's what I'm getting at. That he is blaming her to some extent. Anyway, even though he's forgiving her or whatever.
Well, yeah, but that would be consonant with him thinking she was raped.
That's right, because they didn't know what they were thinking about or
But
talking about.
But I don't think he thinks that this was just a willingly entered into affair.
No, but that something has happened that could come between people in a marriage and that they're going to have to get over, but they will.
Yeah, it's funny. I've been following a soap opera storyline from the late 80s that involves rape. Revisiting it, it's one that I followed at the time. It is about as, like, it's a fascinating, fantastic storyline from Days of Our Lives from the late 80s and early 90s, and it is absolutely as progressive as any media was talking about rape at the time. But it's still full of stuff like the boyfriend having to tell the woman, I don't have any different feelings about you now. So the trope is still there decades later. That was the storyline about making it clear that marital rape is rape.
How long did it unfold for?
Well, because the rapist is ultimately redeemed after many years of working on himself.
It's still going on.
Probably. About 4 years in total.
Incredible.
Of daily broadcasting, people.
Well, this movie, Employee's Entrance, all takes place within 75 minutes. And there are a bunch of dramatic reversals right at the end. Wallace Ford is goaded into shooting Kurt Anderson.
And Warren William does all of this with all of these incredibly crazy things. With just such aplomb.
It's so good. Who else could act this part? It's incredible.
Look, you can't even shoot straight. I got the gun right here for you. I gave it to you and you can't even kill me.
I think you'll have some trouble forcing me to drink that poison. Use this.
He's a broken machine.
You're weak. The inability to shoot his boss is grounds for firing. Again, Warren William is like, this was all part of our father-son dynamic. I'm not going to get the police involved in this shooting, so nothing has occurred.
He didn't actually mean to sleep with or rape his wife.
No, he didn't know about it. I mean, that's the other thing. When I watched this movie, I really believe that Warren William loves Wallace Ford as a son and was really counting on this.
As more than a son.
Whatever, loves him. Was counting on Wallace Ford continuing his legacy and developing this stronger and stronger relationship with him.
This is all he has left. Okay, and this is his punishment.
So he's not a sociopath. He really isn't.
He is still a sociopath. He is still
I think it's more disturbing than that, because he does have these feelings that he can invest in people. It's not that he doesn't have any regard for anyone.
In one person, he's going to put all of his feelings in one
a lot of people
person, and he's going to make that person not have any other relationships.
That's right. A lot of people feel that way. Usually it's about a spouse or something, but...
But they're not gay, so that's a problem. But no, not if you're willing to use prostitutes, that's true.
That's right.
That's the whole...
It's like Grisby again.
That's the whole point of William's philosophy.
Ne touchez pas Grisby.
Yeah, exactly. That's the relationship that he wants, but he just can't get it. And his punishment is that he is going to have to now have that relationship with this grizzly old guy who hates him.
Well, yeah, but hate can blossom into love. And I think it has with these guys.
Maybe they do actually love each other already.
I think they're going to have a beautiful relationship.
So William is punished by the fact that he's actually going to enjoy this life, then?
I think so, yeah.
He just is in a hell of his own creation, stewing in the juices of that particular hell.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, he is reprieved. The WASP patricians at the top of the hierarchy have come to his rescue at the board meeting, and he gets to continue, and he says, yeah, we're gonna go ahead. I've lost one son, but I've gained another one. He sends Alice White on her way, and one of the last things we see him do is throw a dog in a garbage can. So,
yep.
I mean, this is not a redeemed character,
the dog
that's for
represents women as a class.
Yeah, a dog is cute, too, so it's terrible behavior.
And our young couple is left with their minds completely fucked.
Yeah, who knows what's going to happen with them.
Well, the husband says that they're going to leave the city because they can't even stand being in the same city with that department store anymore.
No, absolutely not. They have to change their names and go somewhere else. An incredible movie, if you haven't seen it.
It has a definite relationship, not necessarily on purpose, but with Renoir's The Crime de Monsieur Lange.
A little bit, yeah, I can see that. It would make an interesting double feature.
Which is also Renoir's one real anti-capitalist film.
No, there are others.
Yeah, it was a short period in his life, though.
True. A great Nietzschean double feature here. Babyface and Employee's Entrance.
And again, it shows you how, aesthetically, even while criticizing capitalism, Warner Brothers gets a lot out of it, making it fun and sexy and giving you lots of uncomfortable mixed feelings about it.
Well,
about the figures representing it.
What they've done with both of their protagonists here is in totally different environments than you get in gangster films, but they really do have gangster trajectories.
Sure. Usually the gangster has to be killed, though.
Well, but that's the beauty of this. Because they're doing something lawful most of the time here, even if it's immoral, they don't have to be punished at the end. And so they're not.
Well, actually, of course, Babyface did run into problems with the censors, and although Stanwyck's character wasn't in the substituted ending actually punished, she did have to return home with nothing.
Well, true, of course, there are story developments that occur.
It is interesting that despite being a rapist and really, really mean, it's true, Warren, maybe it's because it was made earlier, like it was made at the beginning of 1933 and censorship wasn't heating up as much yet, but that Warren William does not have to be punished.
Well, Walter Burns isn't punished either.
So you're going to be punished for sexual misbehavior as a woman, more likely to be morally censored than the things that Warren William does in this movie.
Yeah, well, doesn't that make sense to you? That is the culture that produced this film.
Of course. And I mean, that's part of the point of the film.
No, they're not condoning this in any way, but they have made him a very lively protagonist.
And maybe some of the ambiguity about, and the sophistication about the scene where he tricks her into sex, that many people would not even be aware to call that rape at the time, or sometimes now.
Well, yeah, exactly.
Maybe part of the point of that is just to show this kind of horrifying behavior, but not have to punish him with the code.
Right.
And even the suggestiveness of it in another context would be enough to get the censors upset. But apparently this was not.
No. Incredible document, but also an incredible work of art. Just very skillfully created by Roy Del Ruth.
Just to have such a, actually to refer back to that rape storyline, which is the point I'm at with it, is where it is exploring the feelings about what has occurred on all sides, including that of the rapist, who is nonetheless insistently and repeatedly and legally called such, that Warner Brothers would get inside this guy's head and give him such a sort of fair shake. It makes a really fascinating movie than just making him a straightforward villain, even though he is a monster.
He's a monster, but he's a monster with a code of conduct, integrity of a kind. He holds himself to the same standard that he holds everyone else to.
That's one of the sickest things about him.
Yeah, exactly.
My mind keeps traveling back to the enigma of the way this relationship between Warren William and Loretta Young is presented. Like you were saying, why do they get this meet cute at the beginning? And then some of the energy of that carries over to the beginning of the scene at the party.
It's just to crush our spirits.
Despite something terrible already having intervened. The only thing I can think of, but it almost seems too obvious, is that this represents this toy house, this mock house inside of his department store, and the woman inside it represents this entire life that he's decided to give up.
Yeah.
And all the wax fruit and the fake milk that he can't eat and drink.
It's an ersatz American dream kind of life out in the Midwest that he decided against even trying to pursue.
And what is his response to it? He has to just keep raping it.
It's true. It really does seem like, again,
it's a compulsion.
He is presented with the same kind of choice that Stanwyck is given. He's got this ruthless code. Will he be able to stick to it? In his case, yes.
Yeah, like we said when we were talking about Babyface, in his case, yes.
Like, all Babyface has to do in order to have a wider range of human experience is give up on this code, and she eventually does by agreeing to go back to George Brent and helping him with his legal issues. All Warren William has to do is stop raping people. Yeah, he does it. It's a praxis for him. It really is.
Consistency. Yeah,
he really...
And he can't, and like I said, he can't even seduce her like a normal person. He has to Cosby her.
As you say, in this weird charmed interval where she's in a domestic space inside on one of the floors of the department store, they do have a really charming interaction. It feels like a different movie where they might actually be romantically paired for real.
It's almost like a Twilight Zone, the way he enters into this, or Inland Empire, the way he enters into this other world inside his world.
Really feels like Inland Empire. And he's very genial there. He he hardly barks at all, and he's interested in her in a way that he doesn't seem to be interested in anybody else in the whole film.
And that's why he has to keep badgering her what she's asking about, because he's just becomes obsessed with this idea that he has to destroy. I don't know, it's a fascinating movie. I know I keep using that word, but it is.
Did you want to say more about your soap opera project?
Only that I'm definitely getting an essay out of this. I've started reading a cultural history of soap operas. I've already stumbled upon the fascinating fact that never occurred to me before. I'd always thought that daytime network soaps were fiction aimed at women that was created by men. But it appears that, in fact, more women writers worked on soaps, including head writer positions, as a percentage of writers, probably than anywhere else to this day.
Yeah.
In television.
Including in radio before that.
Yeah. So, that is presumably partly because it was supposed to be aimed at women, and also because it was considered drudge work, hack work.
Yeah.
To have to produce content, a daily content.
That's right. The treadmill.
But that makes it really interesting, particularly when revisiting a storyline that in memory made me kind of uneasy, because as much as I enjoyed it as a 12-year-old, the idea of men making entertainment out of rape for a female audience obviously made me retrospectively quite uneasy, especially since this character does ultimately, the rapist, have a redemptive arc. But knowing that this was fiction written by women for women is much more interesting.
Always better to be made uncomfortable by women than by men.
Well, unless you're one of the people who wants to burn 50 Shades of Grey, but...
So Elise and I we've been following some odd tracks lately. I have been revisiting cereal mascots in McDonaldland in a serious way. I do this occasionally. I'm always hoping to get a great novel out of it, and maybe this time I will. We'll see.
Cereal mascots. Breakfast cereal he's talking about.
Yeah, more on that some other time, I'm sure. Next week, we start year 2 of There's Sometimes a Buggy with, I think it will be a bang. We're going to be talking about Elizabeth Kendall's The Runaway Bride, Hollywood romantic comedy of the 1930s.
Oh, it's going to be exciting. It's probably going to be a long one.
It's a great book that I read several times in the 90s. The book was published, I think, in the early 90s, or maybe late 80s. I should have double-checked that, but we'll know next week for sure. And it is a pretty searching discussion of several of the most important screwball comedies, romantic comedies of one of the great decades, and she's got a very strong thesis that she adheres to throughout the book that leads her to...
I think it's kind of indefensible, but then most book-length theses are indefensible.
Yeah,
they're just structures.
It's a way to order your thoughts, and I think that she gets a lot of mileage out of it. But yeah, I'm sure we'll be discussing the things that we love about it, the insights that are valuable, and also a lot of the things that go astray in the book.
Well, in our opinion.
Yeah, of course.
Opinions.
Also, we will be discussing 2 films that figure prominently in the book. We're going to be talking about It Happened One Night, which she cites as
the inauguration of Depression comedy.
Yeah, and Mr. Deeds Goes to Town.
Depression romantic comedy.
That's right. Mr. Deeds Goes to Town, 1936, which is Capra's not exactly follow-up. He did one movie in between, which is Broadway Bill, which is a movie that deserves discussion in its own right.
And we're doing Mr. Deeds because I hate it, but I have developed more appreciation of Capra in recent years.
And Jean Arthur.
So I want to see if that extends to this film, which she does not like. Kendall does not like it.
Well,
I mean, she likes the film.
It
but
has
she
a chapter.
She doesn't like what it does to the romantic comedy heroine.
Right. Yeah, and we'll talk about all of that. We'll get into great detail, and it's going to be really fun, I think. So check out that book. Check out those movies. Hopefully you'll have time to do all of that by next week. See you soon.
Night.